Fantastic. Welcome, everybody, to our weekly live stream recording of the M&A Zing, a podcast series devoted to acquisition entrepreneurs, search funds and holdco builders in the UK and the EU. This week, we are delighted to be joined by Charlie Norton, founder of Vamos Business Transfer, a sell-side M&A advisory firm based in Essex in the southeast of the UK. Hello, Charlie.
Hi, Gareth. How you doing? You well?
Very well, thank you, buddy. Thanks very much for joining us and sharing a little bit about your super interesting and exciting journey to this point. Do you want to start by giving us a little bit of a background on what got you into this world and what you were doing prior?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Gareth. And it's nice to catch up with you again since we last saw each other back in September, I believe it was, from memory.
Yeah, it was the show, right? I think we were passing in.
Yeah, the business show. Obviously, you had a stand there, and I actually spoke on stage, and it was a really good show. I'm definitely going to go again next year, this year even. But to summarise a bit about my experience, my background, and what brings me here today, essentially, I started buying businesses at quite a young age, at about 18 years old, and I did that one from inspiration actually from my father, who had a very big vehicle logistics companies, and they was merging with other vehicle logistics companies and looking to have really big PE type exits, or pension fund exits, should I say. But and I saw that at a very young age. That was the exposure I got at a young age, and I was always quite driven in business and wanted to be a business owner from a very young age, watching my dad. Obviously, I see the ups and downs of being a business owner. I saw too many stories to tell over, let's say, an hour podcast anyway. But so I saw that and it inspired me to want to be a business owner anyway. And I had a small exposure of seeing the acquisitions and the mergers from his side of things. So out of college, I got accepted actually into quite some good universities to study business and politics, but I decided actually I don't want to waste 4 years of my life and not earn any money. I was always quite adamant I wanted to earn some monies. So I decided to go into the business world. I was through startups or buying very, very small companies. You know, I'm talking about companies I look back now and think actually it was probably worth zero. And I used to scrape and scrap every penny and pound I could get to, you know, buy like a £10,000 food truck or a small recruitment company or whatever it was I could sort of buy and acquire. And sometimes it was like a distressed business or dormant business. At this point, I was just buy their customer book or their assets and very little things to add to the collection to help my overall business out. And then I got to about 22 and I actually done a fully leveraged buyout. And that was, you know, probably unheard of for me anyway at the time. I didn't know people could necessarily do that. I found out 8-10 years later it's actually quite a hot selling course topic. So my original business that I set up on my own at 21 was a company called Transport Factory, where we would do the consultancy for the haulage companies, but also the driver training as well. And it's actually quite an interesting story. So I rang up the local training schools and consultancy firms, like the bigger players in my local market. And I was just asking if they've got any work, any advice. You know, I'm the new guy on the block, just trying to do a bit of market research and hopefully, you know, establish rapport and relationships with the bigger players. In business, you have to be a bit extroverted. You have to put yourself out there.
Of course, yeah. Don't ask, you don't get, do you?
Exactly. And so I was ringing up the local schools, and one of the local companies called Sigma, they had a really big company on the motorway, really prominent, massive building, been going for 20 odd years at the time. Mm-hmm. And I rang up the owner and I said, look, my name's Charlie from Transport Factory. Would love to, you know, get to know you a bit more, see if there's any synergies we can work on together. And he actually sort of put me down in the sense that he said, he laughed, he went, I don't know why you're setting up, because I'm actually about to buy Newcroft, which is the other big training school in the local area. Well, okay, that's interesting. So the next day,
sounds like a challenge.
It sounds like a challenge, and I do love a challenge. So the next day, went to work as normal, ran over to Newcroft. I popped my big old head in the office, and there's two sweet ladies, Kim and Sue, in the office. I said, is this place for sale? And Kim, the owner at the time, she went, where have you heard this from? And I just went, well, I'd buy it. You know, it's just, it was a weird switch in my brain.
Spur of the moment.
Yeah, it really was. And then the next day, Kim came down to my offices where we had a full state-of-the-art classroom and offices. So very like a mini modern version of her business, really. And we sat in my classroom and she told me her price and her figures and whatnot. And it was the price that Sigma agreed with her. So I didn't actually have to negotiate too much. Lucky enough, I was only 22 at the time and my skill set wasn't there. That is today.
But you went with her target price, did you?
I went with her target price because I thought it was reasonable, it was achievable, and for the numbers I was seeing and the improvements I knew I could put onto that business, I thought this is a great deal.
Can you speak to how you structured the deal? Was it all up?
So yeah, I'll give you some rough figures as well. So the business turned around £200,000 a year, which is actually quite small for what it actually looked like from the front facing forward.
Sure.
And they had about 80 grand worth of assets, and they wanted 140,000 in total for the business. 100% day one payment, all the consideration up front.
Mm-hmm.
And I was happy to do that. So actually, I used £20,000 from a private investor to give me the initial cash injection.
The bit to be able to unlock the leverage.
Unlock the leverage, yeah, and I raised 120,000 through asset finance and invoice finance.
Great.
So that was, and at the time, to be honest with you, Gareth, I was earning pretty good money, like £6,000 to £8,000 a month part time as a transport consultant. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a lot of assets behind me. I literally just brought my first property back then. I used all my pennies and pounds to, secure myself on the property ladder at that point, and I didn't really have a lot to, put together to make the deal. So I had to make it fully leveraged. And I didn't understand that was going to be such a big thing later on. So yeah, we agreed the deal. I bought the business, and I must admit, and it's just funny what you learn as you're, going through the experiences you have to go to, paying down that ignorance debt. So do
you mean that there was a healthy old interest rate on that for your naivete?
Definitely, and I'm sure there's still more to come. I never doubt I'm going to find something new in this world that's going to surprise me. But with Newcroft in itself, so because it was my first proper acquisition and proper leverage buyout, so we brought it on the Wednesday, and Kim and her husband, who was Cara and Pat, actually took the remaining monies, the £10,000 out of the bank. So actually,
they thought they had the entitlement to the cash too. Did you agree to that?
Well, I was so naive. I sort of didn't mention the cash in the bank. I was literally that naive. So it was considered a cash-free, debt-free basis, to them. Yeah. But at the time, I really didn't know what I was doing. To be honest,
you didn't know that you needed the working capital and hadn't raised the finance for the working capital.
Yeah, so I didn't know I needed the working capital.
That's sticky. How'd you get out of that one?
Well, this is the fun bit, and I did turn it around, and it was a brilliant learning curve. So on the Wednesday, I owned the business with zero in the account, and on the Friday, the wages of £3,500 roughly were due to be paid. And bear in mind, I've come in as this wet behind the ears 22-year-old, a little bit qualified, but then all the staff there were 55 plus, vastly qualified. Worked for the company for 20 odd years, when I was in primary school, these people have been around for a long time in the company. They're used to getting paid regularly, weekly and whatnot. So I actually had to rent out half the yard to a skip company to fill it up with mountains of rubbish that was even bigger than our own warehouse. It was It was huge, like a jungle.
And you could turn that around, that deal around to hire out the yard or rent out the yard.
Well,
you turned that around in a few days.
I did, within the next day.
Wow!
So they paid me about £15,000 to take the yard for, I think it was a period of 6 months. But I needed the money to pay the wages and begin, the working capital and manage the overheads. And it's funny, the staff at the time, they was like, "Oh my God, you've ruined the business," in absolute shock and awe.
It's quite a visible change. Yep.
It is. But I also look back and I said to myself at the time, well, if I didn't pay you on Friday, you probably would have left and I'd have no business.
That would have wrecked the business. Yeah, exactly.
It really would have.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So do you still own these companies? You mentioned there about the food van and the recruitment company, obviously with Newcroft. How have you done with them since?
With Newcroft, I've actually bought that business twice. So if a bit of a weird one. So at 22, I bought it at that time, that story. And then I ran it for 2.5 years. We grew to £800,000 turnover, healthy margins. We expanded the company just through organic growth. This was because, to me, I didn't understand about buy and build structures, vertical integration. That wasn't my forte at that point. So I sold to one of my customers, which was a college, a local college in the area, who wanted to get into the transport training sector. And it was a good exit. I sold it for around £300,000. I had 50% on day one, and they paid me off over 5 years. And to me, at 25 years old, I thought brilliant.
You flipped it inside 3 years and doubled your money.
Yes, in a nutshell, yeah. And
not a bad outcome for a 20-year-old, was it?
Exactly. And for a guy who, I just thought businesses, generating income, reducing costs. That's all. Every day, that was my mindset going into work. You
can't go far wrong with those fundamentals, Charlie.
Yeah, they are part of my first principles for any business, to be honest with you, even today. And a year and a half after I sold it, the college actually, in my humble opinion, actually ruined the business. So their accountants or teachers, whoever was running the business at that point, sort of chopped it quite a lot and got rid of half the staff, a lot of the courses, and just
ran it from a spreadsheet by the sounds of it. I ran it looking purely at the P&L and not the bigger picture.
Yeah, and in my humble opinion, academics shouldn't run businesses, and that's just my.
I'm not sure that qualifies as humble, but we'll certainly take it.
They actually spoke to me. This is about 1.5 years, 2 years after I sold it, and said, "Would you consider buying it back? Because we don't really have a need for it anymore." They sort of got what they wanted, create their own apprenticeship program around HGV training, and they didn't really want to be commercial training providers. I would consider it. What is there left? Because obviously I had by the time the 2.5 years ended, my first tenure, all the staff are actually my staff. I hired. So eventually, I brought it back for £20,000 in an asset purchase.
So bought it for 120, sold it for 350, bought it back for 20.
Yeah, and this
sold it again.
Yeah, so and that was last May actually, and this is where the story gets really good, because in that period I didn't own Newcroft for them 2 years. I had good success, and because I started speaking on stages at these business buying clubs and learning more about mergers and acquisition space in that time off, I realised actually the buy and build and grouping companies together to create more of a bigger group company is the way forward. So when I brought Newcroft back, I knew the profit margins of education were much greater than general haulage, for instance. So when I bought Newcroft, I decided to go on a buy and build strategy. So I actually went around buying other HGV schools around the country.
Right. How many did you get to?
We bought 6 in total. To be honest with you, so we had 6 schools together. One was in Kent, one was in Derby, one was in North Lancashire, one was in Surrey, and there was a Wales one actually in Port Talbot.
Great, so pretty national then, pretty national reach.
Yeah. We in the scale of things, I'd say we was in the top 10 transport training providers in the country by the end of the journey. And it's actually funny, now we come to the point of, let's say, last May, or should I say last March, where I bought the Derby business, which you might see me post on LinkedIn a couple of times about. Now, this was my worst ever acquisition. So I bought a company for £1. And it was a distressed business. I knew that going in. Obviously, no one sells a business for £1, especially if it does.
It comes with package.
Well, it was doing 900,000 a year turnover. It had a really nice centre in the centre of Derby, really good part of the country. And it's funny, a broker actually presented me that business 18 months prior, and they asked for £1.2 million as an asking price. And At the time it showed the profitability to sort of nearly get to that valuation, a bit high.
I assume the seller got their £1.2 million out by other means then, did they?
So I offered 800,000 at the time, which I thought was a fair price. Over the course of 18 months, they haven't sold it. So they came back to me in January 2024 saying, look, we really want to do a deal with you. So I reviewed the accounts at that point, and they actually got into debt of around £140,000 that I could see on the books. That wasn't there previously. And the profit shrunk a little bit, not too much, because there are seasonalities in our industry, so I didn't mind that shrinking. It's not the end of the world for me. Especially I had a bigger group of companies anyway coming into it. I'll just take it over, I'll put my systems in place, put my advertising in place.
Yeah, sure. And a group of that size, 150 grand's worth of debt should be amortizable or refinanceable, right?
You'd hope so. So I offered them 300,000 in January, and then we began due diligence properly. It got to March 22nd, and we're about to sign the SPA. We all agreed to it. And they give me a letter. It turns out they haven't paid their rent for 9 months. So they gave me a statutory demand letter from the landlord for, I think it's like £30,000 roughly.
Oh, lovely. That was budgeted for then, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't. It didn't come up in due diligence. It weren't on the aged debtors or creditors. It just wasn't, apparent. So I saw through, a bit of a fit. I said, I'm not going to sign the SPA. So I saw through my toys out the pram and left Derby in a bit of a strop. And I thought that was a terrible experience. I get really annoyed about them sort of things. And then 2 weeks later,
it was a sign of things to come, I assume.
Well, yeah, you know what? I have to trust my gut a bit more because I didn't in this aspect. And to me, I looked at the headline number, £900,000 a year, central location in the UK. They had really big customers like Amazon and DHL as well. I thought this is going to be fantastic. Personally, I don't mind turning around a distressed business. I actually quite enjoy it because there's a sense of pride.
That's where the money can be made, right? On a special situations deal. If you engineer it correctly, you can make some serious money.
If it's not your platform company, it's just vertical integration. It can work, it can definitely work.
Agreed.
And the amount of debt didn't bother me originally, but then 2-3 weeks later, they haven't done nothing about this statutory demand, and they've got to do something before, obviously, it goes beyond the 21 days. They can petition to the court to wind up the company. So it's carried on, and obviously I've sort of left them alone for a week or two. Then they got back in touch with me saying, look, let's do a deal. I went, well, the only way I'm going to do the deal is if I buy the company for £1, right? Because at this point, I don't know what else is going to be under the bonnet.
But it was a fire sale at this point, wasn't it? They needed it away.
It was a fire sale, and it was more to save what they told me, to save the instructors, the staff, the reputation, carry on the goodwill. But
you must have only owned it for about 2 months then.
So and this is actually what caused me to sell my group of companies. I'll explain why. So I bought the business for £1, and then on day one, the amount of crap I discovered.
And it was an outright going concern acquisition of the business, buying the equity, not an asset purchase. Yeah,
I bought the full shares, to be honest with you, and I did that because there was a few change of control clauses in certain contracts, and I wanted to keep the contracts, like the Amazon DHL contracts. And
so, how did this poison the well then, such an extent that you felt you needed to divest yourself of all the other 5?
Well, so it wasn't just like, so the actual debt wasn't 140. It turned out to be around 240. So around 100 grand extra wasn't disclosed. And to be fair, my group of companies could sustain that. Like, in fact, on day one, I injected another £30,000 into the business, one to clear off that statutory demand we spoke about, but also to pay off staff members who apparently were their best friends, and they owed them 2 to 3 months worth of wages. The thing where it sort of fell down is actually the previous owners and the staff. So they sort of poisoned the well against me, and they blamed the fact they didn't pay certain awarded bodies or staff or rent for 9 months or a year prior to my arrival was because of me. So I had 8 weeks, and I think every day for an hour or two, I had barragement from the previous owners about something. You know, oh, you got to pay this debt. And I'm thinking these are your debts that you didn't pay from ages ago. So, and we have payment runs in my company. We have 2 dates every month, and they're the payment runs. It goes through our accountants, and we have a formal process.
And there was no indemnification in your SPA at all, like to make this their
yes,
problem?
there was. Yeah, there was indemnification. So this is the thing they didn't understand, but because from what I could see and tell, they just didn't have anything that I could go after them for. And that's why I did actually pursue legal. On my first month, I actually made the business grow from 50 grand in turnover to 80 grand. So he saw this growth spurt because I started getting on the marketing and just pumping what I knew to do with the other companies.
Seller's remorse.
Seller's remorse, yeah. And he started seeing these numbers come through. He's thinking, bloody hell, like, and they said them last week, you know, if you don't get back to me for £1, all the staff are going to walk out. And then the 2 office ladies, the administrative staff, they were actually, one was his daughter-in-law and one was his best friend from the pub, which is always a bit of a risk factor, you know, going into the relationship dynamics, obviously. So that Monday happened, the threat. And then Tuesday, the operations manager, the daughter-in-law, resigned without giving me any notice. You know, just she put her keys and a company card on her desk, sent me an email. So I was in Essex at the time. And then the office administrator, the supposedly best friend of the previous owners, actually gave me a week's notice, which she was entitled to do so on the Thursday. And she was a really nice person, the office admin. I've got no qualms about her. She did. But
of course, then you're into having to recruit replacements. But did you have some support in the rest of the businesses that could have picked up some of the slack?
Yeah, well, actually, I had a few operations managers around the country, funny enough, and they was doing all their respective roles. In fact, when I first brought SG, I actually hired them a managing director. And then I was seeing there Saturday, and we was having meetings with both our lawyers and the previous business brokers, how we might to untangle this deal. And we was over Zoom calls, and I was saying, look, I'm happy to give you this company back because, you know, it's very distressed anyway, and you've made all the staff leave, but you need to give me my money back that I've already put into the company at least.
So were you still stuck with it then, or did he?
Well, no. So I decided. So I actually spoke to other industry players in the market, like really big schools as well, who I know are active business buyers in that space as well, because it basically was my competition in the buying space. I always knew who was buying in my industry.
Sure.
And I spoke to them individually, saying, "Look, I'm going to exit this company because, you know, I should actually close it down. You know, it's overtrading, insolvent at this point. You know, so I'm not happy with it. But I wanted to give an opportunity to essentially someone else to save the business. But the problem was the catch on that was that the previous owners had to be sort of happy and work together and for that to continue, because obviously my only problem wasn't actually the amount of debt, it was actually the relationship dynamics that the previous owners influenced across the board, and without them, you know, having an input into the new ownership, then it would have just happened what happened to me. So that put off a lot of buyers. They said, look, we already, and these people are local competitive businesses to that business, so they was already aware of the barnacles the previous owners.
They just wanted it. They wanted it to disappear so they could just soak up the business organically, right?
100%, and that didn't happen, unfortunately. So I actually decided to put the company into administration. As you know, they look at the last 2 years before the company closed and figure out, what's gone on, what has led to this happening.
It can be very tumultuous, though, that whole process, can't it? It's quite a distraction from running your day-to-day business.
Well, lucky for me, and this is the silver lining on this dark cloud of a story, I suppose, because I was speaking to other business buyers in that space, the conversation developed into, what are you doing with your other businesses? Right. So this is where the exit in May from my other business actually happened. Before it is in the 7 figures, it was a very good exit for me.
Excellent. Congratulations, sir. Hopefully it's worthwhile then.
Yeah, I've been chuffed, to be honest with you, and it was a bit of a discounted deal, in fact. So I took 100% consideration on day one. I didn't want any deferred, I didn't want any earn-outs, I didn't want to have any involvement in the business, because lucky enough for me, I knew these people, I'd say fairly personally from our years of being in the industry.
Yeah, so there was some inherent trust there between parties.
there was, and they knew my other businesses outside that Derby one were good businesses.
Well, that's excellent. At least there's a happy ending to this woeful story, which it's incredible how one bad acquisition can change your attitude towards a wider business, right? That actually, it becomes a moment of reflection where maybe you're a bit more open to divesting. It affects your relationship with the industry that you're in somewhat. So I can totally understand the journey. But how do you go from there to becoming an M&A advisor?
I'll be honest with you, Gareth. Like, I grew up in the haulage industry, and I wasn't a lover of the haulage industry, but I always loved businesses. I love business, and I probably root for the underdog. I really want to see success stories. I get really excited seeing people grow and develop their businesses. And obviously, being a business buyer and seller for the last 14 odd years, I've had exposure to a lot of brokers in the UK and the EU, and I saw their practices, I saw the overvaluations, I saw the cowboy industry tactic. Actually, a funny story, and I'm not going to name these by name, but one of the biggest brokerage in the EU and UK, well, they came down to my offices once when I was 24 at Newcroft, and a guy called Craig, and he gave me a valuation which was unbelievable. He said, your business is worth 5 times your EBITDA.
Oh, that's the playbook.
There's the playbook. And I did, obviously being 23 at the time, I didn't know. I never actually exited, or 24 at the time, I didn't actually exit a business at that point. And I didn't really buy a lot of businesses to have this experience, though what he was talking about was fluff. And he went, your business is worth 5 times the EBITDA. If you want to sign up with us, give me 20 grand plus VAT today, and we'll market your business. And at the time, I didn't have 20 grand in the bank. So I said to him, you know what? Get out of my office. Thanks for coming. There's the door,
And that's before you saw the 9% success fee, right?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't even read into the terms and conditions. As soon as he gave that headline number, I was like, just get out, because
there you go. So that's you're mission driven then to be a different approach, to be a more I guess altruistic or supportive approach than that kind of corporate what's the word, SDR factory.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't, like Warren Buffett says, I think EBITDA is a bullshit metric. I actually measure businesses on sellers' discretionary earnings or cash flow. That's how I look at the return on investment a potential buyer is going to receive. So I tend to value businesses on their metrics rather than EBITDA. And
we got to remember that Buffett was around before John Malone invented the term of EBITDA, right? So he remembers how businesses traditionally were valued before you started excluding a whole bunch of things.
I know, some of the ad backs I've seen are absolutely crazy.
Adjusted EBITDA is entirely a whole other. That's a different podcast, that one.
Yeah, 100%. And I just want to be a good, honest, hard-working broker, and I want to give business owners and potential sellers and buyers a fair win-win deal. But also, I'm actually got qualified by the ACCA as a business valuer now. So
excellent.
Not only
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so not only my 14 years experience of buying and selling and growing companies, I actually backed up with a formal qualification. I know it's quite common for get a 5 times EBITDA multiplier valuation, and then 6 months down the line, the broker comes back to the seller again and go, "Oh, we've got no interested parties. Maybe we need to downvalue your business."
I've heard it analogized to estate agents sometimes, which probably is unfair to estate agents, frankly. but yes.
I'm quite a conservative valuer because I've obviously bought and sold in different industries. So I actually say, look, I think the business is actually going to sell for this. We can advertise for this, but it's more like going to sell for this. So,
and do you provide like comparators, evidence on like other deals in the space, or?
Yeah, we do provide comparators on actual sold businesses, and I've been quite fortunate where a lot of business owners agree with me what their business is worth, even if it's a lot less than another broker might suggest. But the thing is,
you're very knowledgeable, Charlie. You're very knowledgeable about the M&A space. Obviously, you've researched it heavily. You've experienced it. You've been on both sides of the transactions, and now obviously you are one, an increasingly successful one. How are you seeing the M&A space changing, evolving, like with time and technology?
Well, it's interesting actually, and similar to that in the UK with businesses in general. I do think we've entered quite a tough landscape for the next 4 to 5 years with this current government. I'm not here to talk about politics too much, but it's quite a socialist style government overall, and they increase the national insurances and they increase various different tax burdens on business owners. So it is getting tougher.
It hasn't it? Felt a bit anti-capitalist.
Yeah, it certainly is anti-capitalism. I can summarise it. Yes, it is a tough landscape today, but when the pendulum swings to more capitalist type politics in 4 or 5 years' time, those who are holding the assets, i.e., the businesses or properties, will be in good position, because what I foresee is taxes being crawled back and maybe back to where they were 1 year ago or even less. So actually, I think it's quite a good time to be a business buyer.
I mean, you mentioned Warren Buffett earlier, and actually this whole fear and greed index, when people are greedy, be fearful, and when they're fearful, be greedy. Like that is exactly what you're speaking to there. Is there's going to be an increase in the number of sellers. We're already seeing that. Both of us are in the space. We've seen an increased appetite to sell. I think if things do revert from a taxation perspective in a few years' time, change of government or whatever, then actually there is significant opportunity to divest at a reasonable kind of fund horizon. But are you seeing any changes in trend in regards to like how deals are structured or the technology used?
Well, in terms of actual deal structure, I say we're in a socialist period of the government, but in terms of actually the M&A market and deal structures, we're actually getting quite Americanized. I'm seeing a lot of deferred consideration, earnouts, leverage buyouts as such. And I think that's a mix of a lot of people selling these no money down courses and people figuring out creative ways of financing deals, which is got its pros and cons. If you're an intelligent person with a proven business track record and you already have a platform business in a certain space, and you did what I did, where you buy similar companies for vertical integration, it's great, but you also get, and I actually hate this word only because my name's Charlie, but you also get the £1 Charlies in the space. And I've got no issues against fully leveraged buyouts, but it matters if you're in the space, you've got the means to do it, you've got the experience, qualifications, and a bit of backing to know how to turn that business around or improve that business. I've got no issues with someone doing a fully leveraged buyout, but what I don't like,
not bringing capital to the table, then what they're going to do for working capital, right? If it's fully leveraged and then it's debt-free, cash-free, where's the cash coming from to support the business? You can't over leverage the company.
No,
surely.
exactly. A lot of people, they say to me, "Oh, I want to buy a haulage company." I go, "Are you a driver? Are you a transport manager? Have you ever done anything around haulage?" And they go, "No, I'm a chartered financial planner." I go, "Well, buy an accountancy practice or a tax advisory or an IFA company. Don't buy a bloody haulage company." Because
sector expertise is important. Otherwise, you can be flying blind.
Well, I understand. And I was just talking to someone before this podcast, a really nice chap, and he was talking about potentially buying nurseries. And he
very vogue.
Well, we all know what happened. Someone brought a lot of nurseries once, and how that ended. Yeah, oh dear, indeed. And people see this on YouTube where they see it from, nursery's a great business model, and they're right, it is a great business model. But me personally, even though it's a good business model, and I have a friend in that space, I wouldn't buy a nursery. It's just not my thing. I don't want to do Ofsted. I don't want to get a registered care manager in place. I haven't got a clue. I'm a father of a 6-week-old child. I can't imagine 30 of them running around.
No. Although, having said that, when my son started going into nurseries, you can't help but have your business head on, walking around the place going, and thinking through the model. And I think someone like you, when your daughter goes to nursery, it'll get you thinking. You'll look at it with a different lens, I think. What do you think is on the horizon for Vamos? What's on your wish list? How would you like to see Vamos growing? What's coming up for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm torn between two scenarios because one of the reasons why I done Vamos was not to actually hire 50 people and have massive overheads of rent, maintenance, insurance, and I've done that all my professional life. You know, hired people, hired good quality people, improved the business, grew the business, but you end up, every month going, crap, you've got to pay £80,000 and maybe not be left with, enough to afford your own Chinese meal at the end of the week. So I didn't really want to do that again. But then I also look at the bigger players in my market who are a publicly listed company, turn over £120 million a year. And I think the way Vamos can disrupt the industry and I can train good quality, honest brokers and professional valuers, and in my mold, I know how to engage with business owners because I've been in their shoes. I feel like we could grow into that. So long term, I do see Vamos becoming, an 8 to 9 figure turnover business with quite a desirable exit, perhaps to a banking institution or even another, M&A advisory firm, maybe in America or in Europe. But
great goal. And to be honest, Charlie, it wouldn't be your first time, would it? You've already, no doubt, you'll be successful in this because you already have been in the other things you've turned your mind and attention to. So that's incredible, and we absolutely wish you the best with that because I think you're onto a good thing with this model that leads with people. Have you got any parting thoughts that you might want to leave the viewers and listeners with? Any pearls of wisdom you'd like to take away, or any advice from your 14 odd years in building and buying and selling companies?
I would just say, just do it, whether you're falling forwards or falling backwards. Don't stand still because that means you're stagnant and probably not doing much. I have no fear of being wrong or having failure because I know if I hit failure 100 times, I'm going to have success at least once. And you just need to keep moving, roll with the punches, so to speak. So that'd be my advice going forward.
Keep moving and roll with the punches. I think we could all take a lesson from that, Charlie. That's fabulous. Well, I've really enjoyed getting to know your journey and hearing about your vision for Vamos and the successes you've been having. So long may they continue. And I hope that we get to have a beer at some point soon and talk in more detail about some of these war stories that you've got. But thank you so much for sharing them with us today. How do people reach you?
Yeah, well, I'm very active on LinkedIn, as you are, as you've seen, and hit me on Charlie Norton on LinkedIn, or reach our website where you see some businesses for sale, obviously, at www.vamosbusiness.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Just time for some parish news, if you like, about some happenings in the ETA and search space. This week, we've got a big congrats that's got to go out to Amit Ray and Sergey Shushtanshev of Astra Holdings Group. They've acquired their second company in the recent days, Acorn MPS, which is a turnkey provider of mechanical and electrical solutions to commercial and residential properties. That is hot on the heels of their acquiring Interdoor UK, probably only about 4 months ago. So congratulations to them. They're on an absolute roll. Long may their success continue. On the other side of the equation, in terms of recently closed fundraising round for searchers, we have Alison Stuckless of Vericor Capital, formerly of Vonzeo, who has recently announced her close of her funding rounds for her search fund. And she's now going to begin her 2-year process of finding and acquiring a business. So we wish her the best of luck. And then in wider news, the 6th annual LBS and EASA student-led ETA conference is taking place on the 28th of March at Nuffield Hall near Regent's Park in London. Tickets for that have just gone live. We'll stick a link to those in the show notes. It's a must attend, quickly becoming a staple in the annual fixtures list of ETA events. Cool. Thank you, everybody. And hope you enjoyed Charlie's story. We'll catch up next week. Tune in, 3:30 on Wednesdays, typically. Until then, keep on crunching. Thanks very much.